conviction is having those diamond hands, not lettuce hands that let things just slip through your fingertips when times get tough or you don't understand it or you're embarrassed or whatever, something other shiny rock comes along. This is not a number grow up thing. I think it's more of a set humanity free thing.
Excited for it.
Okay, we're live here. Craig LeBlanc, the doorman with the Daily Bitcoin Podcast. Sorry, it's been a while. I'm building this other media company for Parks and Recreation. Shout out to all my Parks and Rec people that are into Bitcoin that I've convinced to come over. I know there's a growing number of municipal government people listening because I always mention Bitcoin in my other podcast.
The system is broken. Inflation is robbing your wealth. Banks control your money. But what if there was a way out? Bitcoin isn't just an asset, it's a revolution, a decentralized, unstoppable financial system built for the people, by the people. This is the Daily Bitcoin Podcast, your front row seat to the future of money. No hype, no noise, just real Bitcoin insights from the industry's top voices. Bitcoin isn't the future, it's happening now. And if you're not paying attention, you're already behind. Don't just watch from the sidelines. Be part of the Bitcoin revolution. Subscribe now to the Daily Bitcoin Podcast.
But anyway, I have a special guest today, Joe Consorti. Did I pronounce your last name right? Consorti?
You did, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. So I found him, of course, on X. If you're looking to learn a lot about Bitcoin, I think a lot of the Bitcoin community is on X. If I can convince you to go over to Nostr, that's where you really need to be if you're into this decentralized thing. But I found him on X, and I can't remember if I was just reading your profile or if I was, maybe you were on an X Spaces. Do you go on X Spaces often?
I'm going to try to do them more often. I mean, it's something that I did way early on. And then as I really got into joining a couple of companies and helping build other companies, it's something I fell more out of. But now I realize that that's the pulse of Bitcoin. So I certainly want to jump on more of them.
Yeah, there seem to be, that's where they're residing on the centralized platform until this decentralized one gets built out. But as we were talking in this, right before we went live, Joe was saying how he doesn't like to get too much into the Bitcoin stuff because then before you know it, you can be copying. And if he's got a podcast, he's just kind of saying what he's heard on other podcasts.
Exactly.
And I was getting ready to agree with him. And I said, wait, let's go live because I want to record this. One thing I found in some of the Bitcoin spaces is the same people saying the same thing and nobody's converting or telling new people that don't know about Bitcoin. It's just Bitcoiners arguing with Bitcoiners. And I'm like, okay, I want to build something that reaches non-Bitcoiners and find a way to incorporate it into their life. Kind of like it prepared me to work for Bitcoin. So, and you kind of do that in your research?
Of course, yeah. I mean, so what I've done kind of since day one, and I'm very happy to have had a great mentor in this space to really kick things off. I joined kind of the Bitcoin ecosystem, you could call it, when I was 21. I just turned 21 in 2022, May 2022, and I had been kind of, I got my finance degree up at the University of Vermont because they gave me a much better deal than any of the other schools nearby. I'm from the New England area, and so it wasn't too bad of a trek over there. And while I was up there, they gave us free access to Bloomberg terminals. I fell in love with charting and figuring out how world markets worked, fixed income.
What's the Bloomberg term? For those that don't understand what that is, can you kind of explain that to them?
Yes, of course. So imagine basically the best all-in-one dashboard for all financial data you could ever need about anything. So if you want to look up, anything from how Apple stock is trading, of course you could do that on your phone, on the iOS stock app, but you could also do that on the Bloomberg terminal, and then more complicated things. So for example, if I wanted to take a look at all of the different rates on US Treasury debt currently, right? I map it out on a curve. You could do that on the Bloomberg terminal. And then, if I wanted to take a look at Japanese equities or what was going on, with the news and how these different markets are trading, and put a dashboard together where I can watch all these different tickers in real time, these different stocks, other indexes in real time. It's basically what it is. So it is essentially a tool that every single Wall Street person uses. Very pricey. And so when my school said, oh yeah, we're going to provision all of our students with a free one, I said, I don't quite understand how to use it. I've never used it before. I'm going to teach myself because this is a $24,000 a year tool that I'm getting for free. So I started using it, fell in love with it, built a lot of my own charts, worked from that. And then from there, I discovered Bitcoin. It was a very interesting thing to observe because this was right after, I would say I got into this, early 2019 to late 2019. And, that is kind of when I'd gotten to school, late 2019 and early 2020. Bitcoin crashed, everything crashed, and seeing Bitcoin's rebound beginning in October of that year really piqued my curiosity. And so I kind of started incorporating it into my framework of analyzing global markets. And then, I had figured, I'm doing all this work to try to piece this stuff together. Let me see if I could just tweet into the ether and see if I can build an audience from it, and see if I can have, find more people that can help me answer the questions that I have. And it worked. Very slow burn, but I started tweeting, into nothingness in October of 2021. And then, mid-spring, late spring of 2022, I was approached by Nick Bhatia over at the Bitcoin Layer, which is now one of the largest, if not the largest, Bitcoin and global macro research firm outlets now on YouTube. He approached me about helping him convert basically his Substack publication at the time, which was a pseudo sequel to his book Layered Money, into a fully fledged research outlet. And so from then on, him and I were business partners alongside our design lead Matt Ball. And in the time since, we have grown the Bitcoin Layer from around 1,000 subscribers on Substack and no YouTube channel to 25,000 subscribers on Substack, 25,000 subscribers on YouTube, a great X following. I've managed to grow my own X following from 0 to 50K. And all of it literally just through the power of explaining what on earth is happening to people who have no idea what is happening through a very objective and realistic lens, right? We're not hyper sensationalists. We're extremely bullish on Bitcoin and the prospects for what it can do for global markets and humanity. By the same token, we don't like to take a super sensationalist lens. All that is to say, that's the gentleman who mentored me. So Nick Bhatia, a great friend of mine now. He's coming to my wedding later this year. It's going to be so wonderful. He basically one of the first lessons that he had kind of taught me was that price is truth. So whatever the chart says is truth, and you have to piece it together. You can't go into anything with a narrative in your own mind and then try to rationalize the chart around that narrative. For example, rates have come down pretty precipitously over the last, not precipitously, they've fallen over the last 2 years. Price inflation has fallen too. There are a number of narratives you can come up with. There are a number of narratives that you could derive from that. But if you go into reading any kind of chart with a narrative in mind, then you're not being an analyst. You're not reading the tape objectively. And so one of the things that I try to do always, and then the second lesson he told me, which relates into what we're talking about here, is that he always told me to, and this was an issue with my writing for the longest time, from the first time I took an English class all the way up through AP Lang in senior year, was I would use the most complex words to describe the simplest things. And so one of the things Nick taught me early on, and it took me a pretty long time in my writing to get around, is to wean it in, right? You're using that 4 or 5 syllable word, find a 2-syllable word for it. Better yet, remove the entire sentence and explain it in one word elsewhere. And so that's one of the other things he taught me. And those are 2 extremely valuable lessons. One, to basically always tell the truth. And in markets, the price is truth. The chart is your friend. Just listen to what it has to say, right? And now I'm at the point, similar to Nick, where I can close my eyes and I can see the candlesticks in my head, right? I haven't looked at a Bitcoin chart in 5 hours. I guarantee I probably know roughly what it looks like. And the second lesson is, and so for us at the Bitcoin Layer, one of the big things that we wrote about, and we still write about to this day, I've taken more of a backseat at TBL. I'm working on something else over there with Nick, more behind the scenes. But back when I was writing, every single time we would talk about interest rates, because Nick comes from a rates desk. He institutional bond salesman, U.S. Treasury, sell side, and rates are a really tough thing to talk about. They're very complex. Nobody understands them. Nobody understands duration. Nobody understands these concepts. And so every time I would speak about these things in my writing, I would explain them. And so that's one of the things I do to this day. And it can make my tweets always hit the character limit. And it also makes for a slower audience growth, right? Because I could, anyone could very easily just tweet out the charts that I'm tweeting out with, very simplistic, hyper sensationalist caption and grow an audience at like 5 or 6 times the rate that I'm growing it. But what you lose there is you lose that level of trust. You also lose a level of understanding. I'm trying to teach the people who are reading my stuff. I'm not trying to gain followers, right? Your intention impacts your outcome, and so
you're not as much of an entertainer as an educator, and so educators grow a little bit slower, but they have much more stickiness, or at least their audience is a little more sticky.
Precisely, yeah, that's what I aim to do. And it's certainly enticing looking at all of the different trends going on and things that I could do, and it's missing out on follower growth, whatever. But I have to understand, and people have to understand, particularly for people who are trying to grow an audience. Your objective shouldn't be to grow an audience, because if your objective is to grow an audience, you're going to grow. But if your objective is to grow an audience through value, if your objective is to provide value over all else, the audience will come, right? And it'll be a much more valuable audience, and it'll be an audience that's learning from you rather than just being excited and getting an adrenaline rush from what you have to say. So in everything that I do, right, whether I'm writing about, Bitcoin self-custody or real estate or Bitcoin or global macro, I'm always trying to do it through an educational lens. Naturally, that means slower growth, but ultimately what it does do is it means the people you're speaking to, you're providing real value to. So that's, the podcasting that I do, the videos that I do, I always try to educate, speak to someone who has no idea what I'm talking about. That's the aim, right? And that's how we ultimately break out of the echo chambers we're in. We got to stop preaching to the choir. Everyone in these, in Bitcoin spaces, everyone who attends those X spaces, everyone who's, commenting and retweeting and liking and sharing, these Michael Saylor posts, all of us get it, right? But there are hundreds of millions of people around the world who don't. They have no idea what you're talking about. And that's where the real lie is, helping those people onto this big orange life raft. And the way to do that is by stripping it back, explaining yourself 5 times over, explaining these concepts over and over again, and doing it in a language that people can understand. So that's kind of the approach that I like to take, for sure.
And you had asked me earlier how I do booking. How do you currently get speakers on your podcast right now, or do you look for speakers? Or
Oh, for sure, yeah, just through XDM, through DM, mostly. With my show especially, I used to do the show over on the Bitcoin layer. It was basically 50-50 between Nick and I. He does 2 episodes, I do 2 episodes. He does 1, I does 1, what have you. Since then, I've transitioned into a full-time head of growth role over at Theya and Horizon, 2 great companies we're building, and I'm excited to chop it up about and kind of explain what we're trying to do. Now over at Theya, where I run the Theya podcast, where we may do a rebrand into a much cooler name, so be on the lookout for that. But basically, what I do is I just reach out to friends and have them on the show. Those are, like I said before we hopped on, just kind of chopping it up. These are my favorite types of shows to do. They feel very real, right? So that's generally what I try to do. When it comes to like audience outreach, I'm rarely ever jumping and trying to get a Michael Saylor on the show. The biggest guest I've ever interviewed was Senator Cynthia Lummis. I interviewed her immediately. The interview started once the Bitcoin Act of 2024 was unveiled. So the biggest feather in my cap is that I am the first person to have interviewed Senator Lummis right after that was unveiled. But following that, the conversations that I really appreciate are the people that I'm familiar with. But I think for my audience, I think it would be much more beneficial if I did do a lot more branching out and finding new people and new voices.
Well, kind of what we did, at least for my other podcast, is I just have a full-time person that works probably 40, 50 hours a week, just focusing on connecting, networking, scheduling, getting people on the we do a 1-hour prep call for that other one. And then I use Calendly and a couple other apps, mostly through LinkedIn is where that other media company I'm doing is. But when you get to kind of compartmentalize, if you're building a team, if somebody has you focus on 10 things versus 2, you can just get really good at it. So that's really what took us to the next level, is just having some that their only job was to book and schedule and network.
Very
They've
good
got
point.
insanely
I'll
good.
have to bring that to my co-founders. But it's that startup environment that we're in right now. We love wearing all the hats. It really, I think it's what gives us our edge, frankly, how lean we are and how quickly we can move. But when it comes to content, the downside of that is it gets really tough to balance scheduling with also content creation, right? Because you have to find the people who are relevant in the industry at any given time. You have to find people who have interesting things to say, and then you have to reach out, then you have to schedule, you have to do a million other things. And so it's a bit of a balancing act. So ideally in the future, I'd love, if anybody's listening and they'd love to come on board as a podcast scheduler, that'd be fantastic. One day, I've told my mother that I'm going to retire her, and her job can be being my executive assistant, if she wants it, of course. And I would pay extremely well. And only after she retired, if she wanted to. So maybe one day.
We have 3 designers that work for us full time as well. They're like video editors, and that we're able to package all the content that we have and then repurpose it, make all the shorts and stuff. So, but they're based in the Philippines, so they're much, we can, they can live much cheaper than we can live here in America, and they do great work. And these are like college degrees where they have all these. They've been working remotely pretty much for, I think the whole nation has like 38 million remote workers that just work from home. So they do stuff really efficiently, and they're all usually up to date with the latest AI tools. At least the team I have is. So they're able to crank out probably 10 times the amount of content with these new AI tools that they used to be able to. So
absolutely.
You can create. So tell me a little bit about this. What is it? Theya?
Yeah, Theya.
And that's for what, like a multi-sig storage? Or I was reading a little bit about it, but then we jumped on.
Of course, yeah. So Theya is basically, it was initially envisioned as, retail, multi-sig for retail, right? So traditionally, multi-sig is a very, very difficult thing to do. Even for seasoned Bitcoiners, I mean, oftentimes people will just stick to a single sig, cold card, connected to Sparrow wallet, call it a day. But ultimately, that's bad planning, right? You can back up your seed phrase, sure, but that wallet is still a single point of failure. All you're doing with your seed phrase is basically creating a copy in case you lose that device. But what if that device got swept from you, right? What if that wallet file got taken alongside your seed phrase? What if your computer, your cold card was sitting in the desk that your computer was sitting on, and both were taken from you in the middle of the night? Whoopsies, right? Goodbye, Bitcoin. And so ultimately what multi-sig represents is it's an actual method of storing your Bitcoin for the long term. But traditionally, like, that is very tough to do. A lot of people still don't understand what multi-sig even is. And so my favorite analogy is, we have these joint bank accounts with our spouses. Multi-sig can be thought of as just a joint Bitcoin account, right? And so what we've basically created at Theya is a very simple method, and frankly the best method in the world, for people to assemble these joint Bitcoin accounts, right? Whether they are the only person in it, or whether they invite their spouse into it, or whether they invite 2 of their coworkers into it, whether you're an individual or a family or an organization, you can really easily download the app or fire it up on your computer and assemble one in minutes. No technical expertise required. And so that's pretty revolutionary. I mean, previously, a lot of people who just wanted to get into Bitcoin for the savings potential of it and not much else, they didn't have much. Now they have the ETFs, but with that brings custodial risk. And ultimately, the reality that these institutions can be captured. And if they are to be captured or hacked into or whatever, your funds are gone forever. Right? And beyond the 2-factor authentication, you shouldn't really trust your life savings to a username and password, right? And so the options for people who are looking to save in Bitcoin just purely for the savings potential are very minimal. And so what we've created is this extremely sleek, unique, simple method for people to store their Bitcoin for the long term, right? Whether they're doing inheritance planning, or they're entering into account with their spouse, or they just want a more robust personal setup. That's basically what Theya is. And so now we're calling it your Bitcoin operating system. It's something that I came up with, with the help of these which was so fantastic. I've trained them and trained them and trained them, and finally they're my marketing wingman, because I think it's the perfect kind of tagline in order to summarize exactly what we're doing. And that is basically creating the technical infrastructure for individuals, families, companies, financial advisors to safeguard Bitcoin for the future and handle all of their Bitcoin operations, management, and long-term storage in one sleek, easy to use, simple, and relatively worthwhile from a value perspective platform. And again, not to mention that anybody can do it regardless of skill level. We did the grandma test when we were initially launching this. So woman in her 70s, going through the app, she was able to do it. And that was a test for us to see whether or not this thing was mass market. And so, yeah, that's basically a high-level overview of what Theya is. Yeah.
Did it already launch, or have y'all gone through beta testing or anything like that?
Oh, yeah. So we've been launched. We've been live for about a year and a half now. We launched last January. Pretty tremendous success. We have several thousand users worldwide, ranging from people with sub 1 BTC all the way up through, several hundred Bitcoin, larger businesses, small, medium-sized businesses. And it's been wildly successful. We're the first and only Bitcoin native company to go through Y Combinator out in Silicon Valley. So, the world's greatest startup accelerator, most famous startup accelerator. Coinbase went through there, Airbnb went through there. And so being Bitcoin only historically in Silicon Valley has meant, there's not a lot of money there, whatever. But we were able to go through these huge VC firms, and they were able to see the potential in what we're building. And it's paid off. It's paid off to a tremendous degree. We're now live every single country around the world. We're no KYC. So the only information that's required in order to get an account started and fire it up is your email. And that's it. Then you're off to the races. We've had a tremendous, first 16 months, 17 months or so. And we're frankly only just getting started. We've just launched a brand new platform for businesses of all sizes to assemble their own Bitcoin treasury. So obviously that is all the rage, and rightfully so. So now we've built this platform out where any business, regardless of whether you are on Main Street or Wall Street, or you're in the United States or elsewhere, you can basically create this, collaborative management solution for your entire company, right? Whether you want to store your Bitcoin treasury there, or store your Bitcoin treasury, invite your employees and provision them with Bitcoin bonuses, or whether you accept Bitcoin payments, right? We've basically made it so any company that wants to safeguard their firm for years and decades to come through the power of Bitcoin, we've made it so that all they have to do is go to Theya.us, click Get Started, and they're done.
Now, do you have any analogies for those that maybe aren't as well versed in all the Bitcoin terminology, and maybe they understand what a wallet is, and maybe they've got a little hard wallet, and that's the extent of it. But they've always been told, don't give their seed phrase away. You don't want to trust a third party to take custody. And so maybe, is there a simple analogy that you can kind of bridge the gap between where that is and where you are with the multi-sig?
Of course. So one of the better analogies that I've found for, Bitcoin exchanges and more so these quote unquote crypto exchanges that list other tokens other than Bitcoin, it would be like, rather than bringing your money to the bank where you have $250,000 FDIC insurance, it's a massive financial institution. You go to Bank of America, JP Morgan, Chase, whatever. Instead of doing that, keeping your Bitcoin on an exchange is like giving your neighbor all of your money and shaking their hand and saying, don't do anything with that. Because when it comes to crypto, right, quote unquote, and Bitcoin obviously gets roped in with that, unfortunately, we've seen what the bad actors do. They have no interest in keeping your money with them, right? They have every intention of going and lending it out in order to make a return on it. And then they go and lend it out again and again and again. And so, your money is being used as collateral several times over. It's being rehypothecated several times over for these Bitcoin exchanges to make money. And they're not telling you about it. They're doing it behind the scenes. And in 2022, we saw that exploded in everybody's faces. And now that kind of drove a lot of people to be jaded at Bitcoin. But really the problem is centralized custodians. And so ultimately what self-custody represents is, in the same way that you wouldn't, give a set of keys to your home to everyone on your block. You wouldn't keep your Bitcoin private keys in the hands of somebody who you do not trust.
Right.
And when it comes to Bitcoin, everybody wants to get their hands on it, especially yours. When it comes to Bitcoin, you can't really trust anyone. And so self-custody is just a way of holding onto your own Bitcoin and not keeping it elsewhere. It's the first asset, major macro asset, that actually allows for that. You cannot hold a stock certificate yourself. Of course you can, but it's got to be stored in your brokerage account, right? It's not a bearer asset. You can't have it with you. Bitcoin is different, right? Obviously, gold is a bearer asset. You could have it. But the difference with Bitcoin is that it's payable on demand anywhere that you have an internet connection, right? You could sell your Bitcoin to most native currencies in the world 24/7, 365. It's the first asset in the world that allows for that. So with that, that opens up the opportunity for new methods of holding on to it, new methods of security, long-term security. And so one of the more popular ones, and you mentioned seed phrases, has been we'll call it a single key wallet, right? So basically, a Bitcoin hardware wallet, a Bitcoin software wallet, whatever tool you decide, ultimately, it contains the key that unlocks your Bitcoin. Your Bitcoin is stored, under your name. The amount of Bitcoin you own is stored in every single block on the blockchain, right? That's where the data is stored. It's this big ledger that says who owns what. Now, whenever you have one hardware wallet or one software wallet or whatever, you just have one key. Now, the problem with that is that in case you lose that key, your funds are gone. You can do a couple things here, right? You could back up your seed phrase, which you just mentioned, basically 12 or 24 words that serve as a backup to this key, so that if you lose the key itself, you'll still be able to, prove to everyone running a Bitcoin node that you own X amount of Bitcoin. But here's the problem. That's basically like just printing a new copy of your house key, right? Going to Lowe's or going to Home Depot or going to Ace Hardware and printing a copy of your house key. It does serve as a backup, but if one of those keys gets into the wrong hands, someone could still get into your house, right? So now you have to keep track of two things. And both of those things, if either of them are compromised, that means your Bitcoin's gone forever. That means someone gets into your house. It's game over. Here is where a multi-key setup comes in. Instead of requiring one key to unlock the house, what if you needed two keys to unlock the house? And moreover, what if you had three different keys and any combination of two of those keys could unlock the house? Then you've got a very robust solution, because not only do you have a backup with that third key in case you lose one of your first two, but if someone gains access to one of your keys, they can't open your house, right? They need both. And so instead of in our first scenario where you went to Ace Hardware, you made a copy of your house key, somebody broke into your house because they found your backup, in this case, they'll need to compromise any two of your three keys in order to get into your house. So it's inherently more robust. It eliminates single points of failure. And so basically, you take that analogy, you transpose it over to Bitcoin, it works the exact same way. Rather than having one hardware device or one software wallet that's responsible for unlocking the amount of Bitcoin that you own, you have 2 out of 3, right? So there are 3 keys in this setup in order to unlock this 3-key Bitcoin vault, and any 2 of them can open it. So that's the best analogy that I can use to explain multi-sig. Another one is it's just a bank vault that requires 2 keys out of 3 in order to open it, right? And that third key on Theya serves in a backup role, right? It's there for backup. It's there for recovery purposes in case you lose one of yours. So that's the benefit of multi-sig over single sig, right? Multi-sig meaning multi-key, single sig meaning one key. In the event that you lose one of your keys, your Bitcoin isn't gone forever. And so when we talk about generational wealth, when we talk about long-term planning, estate planning, inheritance planning, having a joint account with your spouse or having different accounts each with your children, you don't want to lose the key to get into that account because it's irrecoverable. You can't go into your bank and say, hey, this is me. Look, it's my ID. Can I get into the account? Bitcoin doesn't work that way. You need to be much more security conscious, and Theya is the platform that takes care of that for you.
Now, you can also do 3 of 5 or, other different combinations. Just 2 of 3 is a kind of the starting point.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. So 3 of 5, essentially the exact same scenario. In that case, you have 5 keys, any 3 of which can open that Bitcoin vault. For me, and in my mind, beyond 2 of 3, you tend to get diminishing marginal returns because it's more things to keep track of, right? Instead of needing to have, 2 safes, either located in different areas in your home, or one located in your home and one located at your bank, and Theya holding that recovery key. Now you need 3 things to keep track of. And if you decide to not have Theya in the situation, you need to keep track of 5 things, right? Versus 3 in the first scenario. So it does open up, diminishing marginal returns. I say that because 2 of 3 is still an infinitely more robust security setup than just a single key. Whereas 3 of 5, it's marginally more secure, right? But by the same token, you do have to put in much more time and effort on the user end in order to secure those 5 keys.
Yeah, and what I was thinking of is as city, state, and governments, municipal governments, of course, that's what I'm thinking, seeing as I have an entire podcast on municipal governments, as they start to hold Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset on their books, is this something that would be beneficial for them?
Absolutely. So
Like
essentially what we've built Theya for is for any organization of any size anywhere in the world. And you could tailor it specifically to your needs. So let's take, for example, a municipal government, right? Small, local, or even regional government who wants to, they've seen their balance sheet erode, whatever balance sheet they may have, right? Because depending on where you're located, that may be smaller than most. And so depending on the taxes you're collecting, other revenue you have coming in, maybe you're issuing municipal bonds, you got some revenue coming in from that. You need a vehicle to store it in. Let's say you choose Bitcoin. Okay, wonderful, Bitcoin. You begin, creating a modest stack over the course of a year of, let's say, 100 Bitcoin, right? That's pretty favorable, right? In fact, I'd say that's, more than most would probably do, right? More municipal governments would probably do less. But let's take the example of 100 Bitcoin, right? Now that you have put your capital in Bitcoin and you have to tell everyone that you have 100 Bitcoin, imagine the amount of people who are going to be vying for access to whatever wallet that is stored on, right? And so it's in a municipal government's best interest in order to safeguard its newly found Bitcoin, this new treasury that it's assembled in a multi-sig vault. Now, when it comes to that, your options are rather limited. You could either do it yourself, which comes with the risk of user error and a tremendous amount of technical expertise required, and let alone thing. Or you use so far the only Bitcoin treasury assembly product in the world, which is Theya. Essentially all you would do is you would create a Theya account, just type in your email and your name if you'd like to, what type of organization you are, and then you create a vault, right? And all that would entail is connecting 2 hardware devices of your choice. And if you don't have any, you could buy them directly in Theya, connecting them into this vault, right? Assembling it in a very, very sleek fashion. And then you're done, right? In less than 5 minutes, you've assembled your Bitcoin treasury, eliminated single points of failure, and made it so that anyone who wants to get their hands on them cannot, right? And the benefit with Theya is that we have a whole slew of different features, right? So if you have one primary vault, and then several different operational vaults, right, for different departments, let's say, however your treasury is organized, you can create as many of these vaults as you want. You can also onboard as many employees as you want, right? And you could toggle different permissions. So let's say you wanted to assemble a vault with 3 members of the municipal government's board of directors, or board rather. You could basically assign each of them a key in this vault. And so in order to move funds at all, you would need 2 of those 3 board members to sign off on it, right? And so it also has a feature built in where, let's say one of those board members leaves, you could really easily swap key access from one person to another with just a basic signature, right? Bitcoin signature. And so basically what we've made is we've made a tool for people to very quickly and seamlessly and intuitively assemble these multi-key Bitcoin vaults, right, for long-term Bitcoin treasury strategies. But ultimately, they are built to be unsinkable, right? With these features like the ability to rotate keys to new members in the event that old members leave, and a whole slew of other features that I haven't even spoken about yet. Theya is perfect for governments of any size to assemble a Bitcoin treasury.
Fantastic. Well, I might have a few cities that are up for the challenge that I'm getting closer and closer to. They're friends of mine. Do y'all have any cities to your knowledge that are using your platform?
We have one that's in the onboarding process right now. I can't say who it is, and I think that once they do use us, they may choose to announce it. But basically, what we're doing is any organization that joins up and starts using Theya for Businesses is what it's called, Theya for Business. Any organization that's using it, we're privacy minded, and so unless they want to advertise it themselves, we're not advertising it, right? So we have some pretty sizable Bitcoin treasuries on the platform, right? But we make it a point internally to not advertise that ourselves. That's purely because we don't want those people to become attack vectors. Some of them may not even be advertising that they have a Bitcoin treasury strategy, right? They may be doing this in stealth mode. And so we don't require KYC because we're not a bank, right? We're not a financial institution. So we're very privacy focused from our founding. And so in the same way, we don't really, push, particularly with the one that we're onboarding now, we're definitely not going to advertise who it is. And we're also working on onboarding a country, not just a municipal government, but a country. They've been in the news lately. That's what I'll say. And so these things we're going to keep close to our vest, unless they choose to say we have assembled our Bitcoin treasury powered by Theya, right? In which case we'll take that as license to put that on our website, right? Because we'd love to put these companies' logos on our website, but in the same way that we're no KYC, we're obligated to keep these things private.
Now, for the individual, what's y'all's pricing model for someone to use y'all's platform?
Absolutely. So you can use Theya for $250 a year. That's $250 USD. And for businesses, it's $750 a year, right? And that's for organizations to municipal governments, what have you. And so it's very, very, the value you're getting through Theya, right? Long-term inheritance planning potential, the ability to remove single points of failure, and just the platform in and of itself and what it offers you, it's priced at $250. So that's right in line with our other competitors, and we've seen tremendous success. You can also download it for account on
Oh, I lost you a bit.
So one of that, but ultimately what we found is that once a user signs up, begin using, they start being their own marketing agent for us. Which is
I might be
actually
losing
pushing
you.
this thing live. We wanted to make. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay, that's a little bit better. You might have been in a bad area. Hello. Oh, we might have lost Joe. There we go. I think he might be back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
All right, wonderful. I had to switch microphones. I'm now speaking through the car. I hope that the additional noise isn't too bad.
No, not at all. It sounds loud and clear.
All right, wonderful, excellent. Sorry about that. So what we wanted to do initially is create an experience that's so delightful that people begin telling their friends about it. They love it so much that they want everyone they know to use it. And so far, that's what we've got. Everybody who has gone and assembled either their own solo vaults or created a joint Bitcoin account with a loved one, they've gone ahead and told their friends and family and their neighbors and other organizations that they're involved with about it. So that's what we've been able to do so far. And with Theya for Businesses, that is continued, right? So we began, our wait list was non-existent. We kind of just shadow dropped this out of nowhere. And then what ended up happening was as soon as we had those initial 3, 4, 5 businesses join up, they would tell their small business owner friends about it, and then they would tell theirs. And so now we have a very full pipeline of brand new people who are self-onboarding every single day, and we just couldn't be happier about it. Fantastic.
And really for 20-ish, 20 between, it's under 25 a month, I would imagine, or you just pay it $250 a year, but approximately, that's a pretty reasonable price if you consider what banks charge you, the risk you're taking, the fees, all that kind of stuff.
Of course. I mean, if you consider, obviously, if you consider the opportunity cost of not holding Bitcoin, right, compared to cash, any solution that could help you save for the long term is reasonable, right? And then also one thing for businesses is it's $750 a year, but we do charge monthly for businesses, and that's one thing we've done because obviously organizations, their needs change constantly, whereas with individuals, chances are, $250 a year, long-term savings potential. They've got their sights set on it. They're not going to change. When it comes to moving beyond small and medium-sized businesses, moving to enterprises, people come and go constantly in the C-suite, and so decision-making always changes. And so for the business side of things, we decided to do a monthly billing cycle, whereas for individuals, it's $250 per year. It's annual billing for individuals.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'll ask you as a fellow Bitcoiner, one thing I like to do is, ask what is Bitcoin to you, and kind of, of all the things that you see are the most important functions and components of Bitcoin, how would you describe it?
Right. So I would say Bitcoin is the apex hedge against perpetual monetary debasement. So I mentioned at the start of the show that, I've been told by all of my mentors that I need to use less complicated words. So I'll put it this way. Bitcoin is your safest bet when the world just can't stop printing money. Now, what I mean by this is ultimately we live in this global credit-based economy. The only reason that people are able to, afford homes today is because of the business of banking, right? And the business of banking is to borrow short and lend long. They create money out of thin air in order to extend loans to people, and they borrow on very, very short duration, in an attempt to make a spread there. That's how banks operate. They operate by writing loans, extending loan, taking on debt, and then making a spread in between. And as they write loans, money is printed into existence. And so credit just needs to keep getting extended from these financial institutions. And if that stopped, if suddenly that stopped tomorrow, the modern world, as we know, would completely collapse. There are plenty of people, and myself included, who say, and the Fed, but that needs to be a process that happens on a, 50-year, 100-year time horizon where central banking ends, because if it happens overnight, you don't want to own Bitcoin. You want to own guns and ammunition and food, right? So that's, to me, Bitcoin is at the individual level, at the corporate level, at the family level, at the regional level, at the state level, and even now at the national level, with Trump creating the strategic Bitcoin reserve. Bitcoin is the only way to insulate yourself from the fallout of this system, where money just can't stop being printed, and as a result, quality of life erodes, right? We're not earning enough money these days. I mean, you go back to the 1940s. My grandmother, she was a single nurse. As soon as she got out of nursing school, she was able to buy a brand new Cadillac, and then only a few years after, she was able to build a home on Cape Cod, right? Single nursing student. In order to do that today, you'd have to be a multimillionaire to buy a plot of land on Cape Cod and build on it. And I use that as an example because it's so absurd. We think about nurses today, and we think about people who have a spouse who also has an income, right, whether male or female. But back in 1940, back in 1950, that wasn't the case. And so, we think about what has caused that. And the root cause of that is we cannot stop printing money. And as a result of that, the price of assets goes up. And wages simply cannot keep up with it, right? We're becoming more productive as individuals, and therefore our wages are rising. But at the same time, we're trying to compete with this ever-rising tide of there just being more money in the world to denominate everything against. And so goods and services are getting more expensive faster than we are earning more. That's essentially the problem. And the way you fix that for yourself at an individual level, to rebuild your purchasing power, is to plant your money, plant your capital in a vehicle that is absolutely scarce. Whereas money is absolutely abundant, whereas fiat, right, this paper money printed by central banks is absolutely abundant. Bitcoin is absolutely scarce. So most people are familiar with the term scarcity, right? There being a finite number of something. Gold is traditionally seen as the scarce asset, right? Oh no, recession is coming. I'm going to buy gold because they're going to print money. Most people don't even know that they print money. And also most people believe, funnily enough, most people believe, or at least a lot of people believe, that the US dollar is still pegged to gold, which is something insane. I went to a conference. Yeah, I went to a conference at MIT 3 weeks ago. A lot of established business people, plenty of them still thought that the United States dollar was pegged to gold, which was baffling. Some of the most successful business people across the country, like businesses you would know. And so even the most financially literate among us don't know what's happening here. Gold is relatively scarce. You can increase the supply schedule of gold every single time you find more of it. As soon as gold's price rises, more people want to get their pickaxes into the ground. That increases the supply schedule. That's called a supply response, right?
Mm-hmm.
In response to increased demand, which leads to increased prices, there is a supply response. The supply schedule, or the issuance of new units of this asset, increases in order to meet the rising demand, and that suppresses prices, right? So basically the example would be the gold price rises, more people want to dredge gold out of the ground. That makes gold's price fall back to its equilibrium level, right? Bitcoin does not have a supply response or a demand response function, right? Or a supply response to demand, rather. And so it's a one-of-a-kind asset that makes it absolutely scarce. No matter how much people are buying this thing and buying this thing and buying this thing, there's never going to be a 10-for-1 stock split in Bitcoin. There's never going to be an increase in Bitcoin's supply schedule. It's always going to be 450 Bitcoin a year for the next 3 years until it falls, and then it'll fall again, and then it'll fall again until there is zero. It's a one-of-a-kind asset in its absolute scarcity. Therefore, it's the best asset to hold if you want to preserve your purchasing power, right? If you want to be like my grandmother, a single nursing student who was able to afford a car and then buy a plot of land on Cape Cod and build a cottage on it, Bitcoin is the asset that you want to own in order to preserve your purchasing power, which the federal government, in cahoots with global central banks, are trying to steal from you.
Now, maybe explain to my listeners. So why don't I, if Bitcoin's too expensive, why don't I just try some of these other cryptos and Bitcoin 2.0? I can get in early on these. Can you explain for our audience the difference that you see between Bitcoin and all these other crypto projects?
Right, absolutely. So every time there's something successful, hundreds of people come around and try to ride the coattails of it. So what I'll say is, this may have come before me. I don't know where I heard this term or if I came up with it. So I'll just say I heard this term somewhere. An affinity scam, right? Basically what crypto is, and I always put crypto in quotation marks, and if I had my camera on and I wasn't driving on a 6-hour drive. I appreciate you bearing with me through this, by the way.
Yeah, no problem.
I usually do quotation marks with my fingers to explain crypto. But essentially what it is, there's money to be made. There's money to be made in convincing people that they have the next best Bitcoin. They have Bitcoin, but better. They have the next Bitcoin, right? There's money to be made there. Essentially, the key differences between Bitcoin and crypto are thus. Bitcoin is similar to gold. Anyone can mine it. Anyone can go find some. I'm trying to find some right now. I have a little BitAxe. It's this little tiny Bitcoin miner that sits on my desk and hashes away. Not very powerful, but there's a chance of me finding some Bitcoin. Just like there's a chance that when you're going to Pennsylvania and you go put your sifter in the river, you're probably going to find some gold nuggets, right? In the same way that anyone can mine Bitcoin, anyone can mine gold, right? That's not the same with all other non-Bitcoin tokens, right? For example, you cannot go and mine XRP, for example. All of it's already been pre-mined, right? So you think, wait, what on earth? It's pre-mined? Basically, what happened with XRP, which is one of the newer scam tokens, is Ripple, right? Ripple Labs basically created 100 million units of XRP. which is the token for Ripple Labs, right? Basically, it's the same thing as issuing a stock, but they're doing it in an unregulated environment. And so essentially, XRP is more akin to issuing corporate paper. They've created 100 million units of this thing, and they dump it on retail investors every so often. So, new supply comes, quote unquote, online every time Ripple Labs sells. They're not mining XRP into existence. Nobody can mine XRP. It's all already been drudged up out of the ground, or more accurately, printed out of thin air, not unlike fiat money. And so the difference between Bitcoin and crypto is that in the same way that central banks control the money supply, centralized institutions control the supply of these non-Bitcoin tokens, right? They decide what the issuance schedule is, how much of it gets put onto the market at any given time. And Bitcoin couldn't be further from that, right? So in the same way that, and you could call this a neutral asset. So a neutral asset, right? You could say geopolitically neutral, but I'll say neutral in a supply sense, right? In the same way you could go down and dredge up some gold from the river, anyone can go find a Bitcoin, right? Anyone, right? There are huge pools of miners that have an insane amount of computing power. They're spending millions of dollars a day to try to find Bitcoin. You could compete with them and you could find a Bitcoin yourself. In the same way that you could go take a pickaxe, go prospecting, find a plot of land that you think may have gold underneath it, start digging and find gold, right? So that's the primary distinction. And the reason companies do this is to fleece unsuspecting retail investors by conflating Bitcoin with everything else. One of the things that I've been saying, in addition to putting crypto in quotation marks, has been saying there's Bitcoin, then there's everything else. Because that's frankly the best way to describe it. And in the same way that at the start of the call I mentioned price is truth, if you look at Bitcoin relative to the second largest crypto token, Ethereum, Ethereum has been in a downtrend relative to Bitcoin for 6 years, or 5 years rather. So 5 years straight, nothing but down. What does that tell you? That tells you the market is beginning to value the other stuff less and less and less relative to Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is widening the gap between itself and everything else. What does that tell you? That tells me that the market is coming around to the value proposition of Bitcoin relative to all the other stuff. It's beginning to realize that Bitcoin is the only worthwhile player in this space. And I call it, a space, I'll also put that in quotation marks, because it's an artificial space that's been constructed around Bitcoin, right? You can't go and sell other gems you may find alongside gold for a close value to gold. The second best is silver, right? There are other monetary metals, but you couldn't find a shiny gemstone in the ground and market it as the next gold and then, take this shiny gemstone to a $1 trillion market cap. You just couldn't do it. But we are in that stage for Bitcoin, right? We are in that stage where basically it's the quote unquote digital gold rush. Everyone and their mother is trying to find the next Bitcoin. But the reality is there's no next Bitcoin, right? It's already found. The market is coming around to its utility more and more. It is the only asset that can serve this role because it was the first asset conceived and only asset with these monetary properties to serve this role, which is hedge against money printing. And so we're winding down that era. There will always be these scams, but I wouldn't say that these scams are going to be as prominent forever. The price action would suggest to me that these things are on their way out. So that's what I would say is the difference between Bitcoin and everything else.
Now, have you heard it said that Bitcoin's a protocol? All these other things are technologies. Protocols are winner take all. Technologies can be winner take most, and that as long as it's a protocol, it just functions differently. What are your thoughts around that? Or have you heard of that concept?
Correct. If you think about the internet, for example, right? There isn't a second internet. There isn't a second best internet. There are second best internet applications in the same way that there is a rank order of different applications you can run on the Bitcoin protocol. But there is no second internet, right? Protocols are winner take all. When it comes to telecommunications, there's only one. When it comes to radio communications, there's only one. When it comes to internet communication, there's only one. There's no second protocol, that ranks underneath the things we use every day. Mm-hmm. In the same way, Bitcoin is taking all, right? That's how I would describe its current price action. right? There are technologies, right, with all this other stuff, and just like the dot-com bubble, most people are beginning to realize that most of these technologies don't do anything. They're a Rube Goldberg machine at best, and a Ponzi scheme at worst. So Bitcoin is a protocol, right? Very much so. The correct way of saying it, Bitcoin with a capital B represents the protocol. Bitcoin with a lowercase b represents the currency that runs on that protocol, right? And everything else slowly but surely dissipates and fades away. We're in that trial and error period where these things are so nascent and so young that people are still finding their footing. And we live in a world of 8 billion people. It's going to take a while for these concepts to mesh. But after a while, 30, 40 years from now, you will have no idea what Ethereum is. Like, new people have no idea what Ripple is. No, new people won't even know that there are alternatives to Bitcoin that are digitally native, right? They'll have no idea. So we are very much, and it is an interesting time to live through. But it could historical patterns in the way that these things emerge. That's certainly where we are.
Okay, so I think we have time for one more question. I see we've got about 5 minutes left. Can you maybe explain to the audience why it's important that Bitcoin is bound by energy, meaning that you have to use electricity to plug in the miners, bounded by the kilowatt? Why is that important, that there's a proof of work system?
So everything worthwhile in life requires energy. What I will say is that, some of the most meaningful things people find in life, right? Their relationship with God, worthwhile relationships in their own life, building a family, creating a worthwhile career. At an individual level, all of these things require energy, and not just energy, but targeted energy at trying to achieve a specific thing. And depending on the amount of energy you're using, the more prosperous, the more worthwhile your outcomes become. If you put more targeted, focused energy into building a career, chances are you'll be more successful than if you're trying 12 different things at once in this industry and that industry and the other thing. You fall flat on your face. For it, even compared to not putting in a lot of energy, right? So, at an individual level, this is true. The other thing I will say is money itself is supposed to represent physical reality. And so if we're not tying money to energy, we just come back into the same exact predicament we're in today. Fiat money, right? Government's central bank printed money out of thin air requires no energy, or very little, right? It can be minted out of thin air with no energy whatsoever. As a result, we see these huge widespread pricing distortions. The world around us no longer makes sense. How come, the median income, let's say in 1970, was $25,000 or $30,000 a year, and a home was let's say 70, right? So 20,000, 70 or 80,000. That's 4 years of work in order to get my home. The moment we detached money from physical reality, gold, right? We detached the US dollar from gold, which was physical reality, which required energy to create more of. Now, all of a sudden, 50 years on from that great experiment, the median income in the United States is $70,000, and the median home price is $480,000. So all of a sudden, where a home used to cost 3.5 years worth of your income, it now costs 7 or 8 or 9, right? Realistically, if you're living in the Northeast, it costs more than 10 years worth of your income in order to buy a home. So what happens when we detach money, which is supposed to be a means of communication, we're supposed to try to communicate the value of these things to each other. The moment we detach it from physical reality, we can no longer communicate with each other, right? These distortions get created. And so it's of extreme importance that Bitcoin expends energy when it is being issued, right? Obviously, so it can maintain its rule set. The other thing when it comes to Bitcoin and expending energy, so long as the protocol is, its hash rate continues to increase, right? The amount of hashes per second on the network increase. it's going to be increasingly expensive and cost prohibitive and stupid to try to attack the network and change its rules in any way or steal Bitcoin from people, what have you. And so from a monetary perspective and from a resilience perspective, it is important. It is of extreme importance that Bitcoin not only continues to expend energy, but it continues to accelerate in its energy expenditure year after year. That is what I believe.
Fantastic. Well, man, thank you so much. We're at the top of the hour here, but I appreciate you coming on the show. I actually have a couple more questions that we'll have to cover on maybe a later episode. I can get you back over here in a few months if you're open to it.
Of course, yeah. Sorry about that. I tend to be long-winded, especially with stuff I'm passionate about. So would definitely love to come on and answer the other stuff.
No, I'd much rather you give good answers, and we can always, come back and give another set. But had a lot of good insights, and I'm so glad because some of the stuff my audience hears me say the same thing over and over and over again. So I'm so glad that we have guests that come on and just hit it from another angle, and plus they could hear from somebody else. So, did I lose you again? We're having spotty coverage. Hold on, he might be able to come back. Oh, I think he's back. You there, Joe?
Yeah, right. We're going to the castle right now. So.
Oh yeah. Well, safe travels, man. Thanks for coming on the show, and I'll reach out to you. We'll get you back on here maybe in a few months. Check in on you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Craig. Awesome to meet you. Awesome to rip. And thanks again.
Yeah. Have a safe trip.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. All right. So that was Joe Consorti. Love those guys from Y Combinator. Great little incubator up in, I believe they're in Silicon Valley. But they've incubated some really good companies. It's really nice to hear that they're incubating a Bitcoin company. I didn't know that they went for that kind of stuff. I guess it was just a matter of time before a good Bitcoin company would come through their program. So good to see that. Look into his company that he had talked about. I think it's called Theya. Hold on. I don't want to, Theya, Theya, Theya. And that was Joe Consorti. Really good content that he puts out. As I tell a lot of my Bitcoiners that come on my shows, new Bitcoiners, I'm kind of one of the newer guys, presenting in the most simplified way I can possibly think of to explain Bitcoin. But behind me, there are a wall of content creators, of experts in the industry. Joe is one of them, that as you get to a certain level, you need to graduate from grade school to high school to college. And believe me, I'll tell you this, that, the more you know, the more you understand, the more your conviction grows. And your conviction around Bitcoin is the most important thing that you have, because it doesn't matter that you buy Bitcoin if you can't hold it. If you sell out because you think that, property's more important, or, you just maybe get scared out. And it's usually that conviction that you gain through knowledge and understanding that allows you to hold through the hard times, hold through the dips, and then hold through the temptation of fiat constantly offering you homes, cars, whatever else. Conviction on your Bitcoin is having those diamond hands, not lettuce hands, thing you can that let things just slip through your fingertips when times get tough, or you don't understand it, or you're embarrassed, or whatever. Something other shiny rock comes along. This is not a number go up thing. I think it's more of a set humanity free thing. And those are all good things. So you're gonna have to hold it like it's the greatest invention in mankind's history, because me and many others believe that it is. Okay, so I'm Craig LeBlanc, the doorman, signing off for another episode of the Daily Bitcoin Podcast. And hold on, let me close out with my media asset that Chris made me, because he does such a great job at this. And we'll close out the show with a little 60-second promo of this show. And let's see, set as outro. All right, guys, we will see y'all next time. Thanks.
Welcome to the Daily Bitcoin Podcast, where knowledge meets financial freedom. We're here to break down the world of Bitcoin. No fluff, no hype, just real talk about how this digital asset is reshaping the future of money. Inflation is stealing your purchasing power, but what if there was a way to fight back? Enter Bitcoin, the digital currency that empowers you to take control of your wealth. Ever wondered why your money doesn't stretch as far as it used to? At the Daily Bitcoin Podcast, we educate, inform, and inspire. From expert interviews to breaking news, we bring you everything you need to stay ahead in the Bitcoin community. Market updates, expert insights, real-world use cases, and practical tips to navigate the Bitcoin economy. So whether you're a seasoned Bitcoin investor or just getting started, this is your daily dose of Bitcoin wisdom. Don't miss out. Subscribe now, hit that bell icon, and let's break free from the chains of inflation, one Bitcoin at a time. The Daily Bitcoin Podcast, your gateway to financial freedom.